Oh boy, the Tolkien purists are not going to like this one bit. So when I first heard of the concept of Tolkien and anime coming together, I thought, this sounds amazing, because I'm a Tolkien fan, I'm an anime fan, because both Tolkien and anime are the kind of stuff that I really like about entertainment, because these are the kind of stories that take advantage of these fantastical imaginative concepts and orient them towards more mature audiences. That's the kind of stories that I adore. That's right up my alley. So when I heard that there was going to be a Tolkien anime, I was pretty excited. I thought to myself, this is going to be a really good concept. This seemed like home grit, like a home run. This seemed like a home run hit. Like, they'll knock it out of the park. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Well, this movie suffers from a lot of embellishment issues. Side note, just got a note from a friend watching the movie that he's almost done watching the film and he's kind of depressed. He's very passionate about Tolkien consistency. Like I said, Tolkien purists are going to hate this movie. I get that they're trying to make this a feature-length film, and the story at its core is a side story which emphasizes that Middle-earth is this whole world with all kinds of history, which further adds to the authenticity of the experience of Tolkien's writings. So it makes sense to add on to the side story to have more character building and things like that. I mean, this kind of story should work in concept, especially in regards to Peter Jackson and the people of Japan. Two different groups of people who are very passionate about their storytelling, even at their most flawed points. Like, I could even watch something like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure from Japan and say, that's a very flawed series, yet there is a lot of passion put into that series. Or with the Hobbit trilogy by Peter Jackson. That is a very flawed film trilogy, but I would still consider that was filled with a lot of love and passion on part of Peter Jackson and his crew. And since that passion is clearly evident from what we've seen from behind the scenes, and if you're paying attention in the film itself, I can safely say with full confidence that this movie is so much better than Rings of Power, which leads me to the following thing that I want to get out of the room. Let's get the Oliphant out of the room. No, the character Hera is nowhere near as insufferable as Galadriel from Rings of Power. Yes, the film does embellish Hera a bit too much, which I'll explain later on in the film, but believe me, Hera as a character is nowhere near as awful as Galadriel was in the Rings of Power series, because unlike Galadriel, Hera actually cares about the people she's protecting. Hera actually has moments of reconciliation with her enemy, unlike Galadriel. And unlike Galadriel, Hera actually makes rational choices. What is the story of the War of the Rohirrim? So, in the appendice from what I've read, it tells the story of Helm Hammerhand and his family trying to settle negotiations with other tribes who live nearby. But unfortunately, after a failed arrangement between the marriage of Helm Hammerhand's daughter and the son of one of the tribes, Helm and one of the other tribes people don't really take too kindly to one another. So they go outside, they have a brawl, and Helm finishes off his opponent in just one punch. Insert the One Punch Man theme song, given that this is an anime collaboration. So the moment that people find out that he got killed in one hit, war is declared and Helm Hammerhand has to keep his people safe. They eventually make their way to Dunharrow, which is then called Helm's Deep, because Helm has that much of an impact on the history of the people of Rohan. And so as the war lingers on with a very, very harsh winter, Helm starts to become quite a monstrous person as he goes around killing people one by one like a Giga Chad, and he spreads so much terror amongst his enemy people, going out on his own, killing people one by one, that his enemies consider him a wraith that cannibalizes on people. That's a pretty terrifying concept. So, needless to say, Helm Hammerhand has a glorious stand amidst the frozen cold, and eventually Helm freezes and Helm is remembered as a hero. I want to take a moment to actually talk about this particular film's strengths, because there are some moments in the film where this collaboration actually works. Even though the animation is admittedly a wee bit choppy from time to time, it looks gorgeous and amazing. Something about the color palette and the lighting and the way the camera moves around with the hybrid animation, it's very engaging and it's deeply cinematic. I felt like I was watching another one of Peter Jackson's movies in the big screen again, or the small screen extended edition. Like a Chad. And the film at times does take advantage of the fact that it's animated. I was seeing this movie with my family, and there was one person in my family who was not very used to anime, like me and my audience are. But when he saw what anime was capable of through this movie, being a Tolkien fan that he was particularly impressed with the sweat drops and the teardrops and the way characters express themselves, even like minute expressions. He was really impressed with that, and I kept telling him, yes, this is what anime is capable of. It's capable of taking this creative medium that's presumed to be for kids, but it's actually got the creativity to be so much more than that. It can cater to older audiences. It can really showcase the soul in action in these fictional characters through these micro expressions, through these, eye differences, the sweat drops, and all that good stuff. And I watched this film, and there's impeccable detail with certain mountain scenery, forest scenery, and of course there's nostalgic callback here and there to the previous movies, given the location that this film is set in. When the animation shines, it really shines, especially in scenes like where Hera is trying to deal with the rogue diseased Oliphant. There's some brilliant, or even during the opening sequence of the movie, or a scene where Helm is fighting an ice troll. These scenes are really well done in animation. The way the camera moves, the way the animation is pretty seamlessly done well together. Particularly with that fight scene between Helm and the ice troll. That kind of scenery has so much energy and so much visceralness to it. It's that kind of scenery that is possible to make in live action, but it'd be very tricky to do. But with animation, it's much more easier. And not only is it easier, it's, when done in this manner, it's vivid. And this is exactly what animation is capable of. And I want more movies like this. The problem is, this movie has some major embellishment problems that holds it back from its full potential compared to the best of anime, compared to the best of Peter Jackson, if you know what I mean. Other strengths that this movie had was some of the characterization of other characters, like the Helm's sons, I think the film did a good enough job at making you care just enough for several of these characters' well-being, so when a character dies, you really feel the impact, and there is this ongoing theme about pride and how pride can really tear down kingdoms when it's taken to envious ends. I think there was one scene that made audiences laugh in the wrong way, like how Helm literally froze to death as he was fighting on. But there was this one particular scene that made me and my family all simultaneously laugh. So spoiler alert, there's a scene where Hera puts on a wedding dress as a means to distract Wolf so that her people can get away, and she challenges Wolf to a duel, and Wolf's advisor tells Wolf, no, don't keep doing this. I keep telling you again and again, don't do it. And what does Wolf do? He arrogantly ignores him and keeps going on in his vengeance quest. It's at that moment that me and my family just all laughed. I even made a meme. I even made a short about it just for one of my family members. It was just so funny.
Hey kid, you can't skate here!
You can't tell me what to do!
Something that genuinely surprised me about this movie was the inclusion of the late Sir Christopher Lee portraying Saruman the White, the Maiar. I mean, I thought they were going to hire Corey Burton, but I was actually quite surprised when I heard that they were going to get Christopher Lee involved. And apparently they used archival footage for this particular part. And when I heard Christopher Lee speak in anime form, just something about that just felt so profound to me. It's just these two art forms forming together, especially given the brilliant, immaculate detail they put on Saruman's face, especially his eyes during the part where Saruman gets to speak and you hear Christopher Lee's genuine voice. There's just something so brilliantly profound. It's a scene where they could have easily have taken the scene out, but they kept it in, and I'm glad they did, because it's part of the story anyway, because Saruman, after the events of the Rohirrim, does gain ownership of Isengard, as he was still a protector. That was before his fall to evil. Now let's address the thing that everybody's been complaining about with this movie, Hera. Right, so here's the thing. Strong female characters have evidently been done right before. I mean, both Anime and Peter Jackson have done this right before. With Peter Jackson, he depicted some brilliantly written strong female characters with Éowyn, with Arwen, and with Galadriel as the most prominent examples. There can be some other examples if you're paying attention, especially given the nature of mothers. With anime, there's a lot of strong female characters I could mention that are written particularly well, especially the ones from Hayao Miyazaki's movies. Namely Nausicaa, who I've heard was an influence on Hera, if I'm not mistaken. So, in many respects, there's some scenes in this movie where the context of Hera being this awesome warrior type of person does actually make sense. Like, for example, there's several scenes, a flashback scene and in the final battle, where it's depicted that Hera has a shield and a sword, and she's taking on Wolf, who only has one sword. Now, here, Hera has a tactical advantage, so it makes sense as to why Hera is able to take out Wolf as an opponent. Believe me, I've had one friend of mine, I'm not going to say his name, but one friend of mine, unless he wants to reveal himself, one friend of mine who went to this sword fighting fair, and he gave himself one sword, and he was trying to take out two opponents who both had a sword and a shield. Needless to say, it didn't go very well for him. So, applying that context to the film, yeah, it makes perfect sense as to why Hera is able to dominate Wolf in this scene. And honestly, I think the fact that Wolf has only one sword and no shield compared to his opponent can actually further visually represent this character's arrogance. And besides, Hera's also playing the role of a shield maiden of Rohan. So that kind of fight setup, I didn't mind at all. I think that actually makes sense. Something else you need to consider is that Hera is the daughter of Helm Hammerhand, a man so strong and buff he could punch a man to death with just one hit, and was such a gigachad that he terrorized an entire army in the middle of the freezing winter. Doesn't it make sense that a man like him could pass on his genes to such a tomboyish soul? Does it really surprise you in that regard? So, I mean, that kind of context makes sense. So, by that kind of logic, the overall context does make sense. It's just a matter of execution. The film tries to portray Hera as, this great unsung hero. And I gotta give respect to the actress who played Éowyn doing the narration for this movie, as if she were, gathering children, people around the fire at Rohan and recalling such epic stories. Like, that kind of narration does make sense. But the fact that they're trying to sell Hera as this, unsung hero, whereas in this movie she does all these overtly incredible feats in public, it makes it hard to believe that she's an unsung hero if she does all this overtly incredible stuff. Another thing that bothers me about Hera's characterization is the fact that there seems to be a lot of emphasis on Hera as a character, even though she doesn't really go through a lot of character growth, and this is really going to get on specific people's nerves, specifically the type of people who are sick and tired of poorly written girl boss characters. Good news, Hera is still a better character than Galadriel in Rings of Power. Like I said earlier, Hera does show some genuinely compassionate traits. Although, I think the embellishment issue is very telling when Hera as a name came from Greek origin and not Norse origin. And Norse origin is the primary influence of Tolkien's world building for Middle-earth. Yeah, something's not right here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Philippa Boyens, as much as she did have the right to gain influence from some English shield maiden heroine in history, if I'm not mistaken, I think she herself got carried away with the characterization of Hera, because almost at every other point, the villains, the heroes, like every other character saying, oh, Hera's the hero, Hera's the hero, oh, Hera don't need no man. At every particular moment, I just couldn't stop hearing, oh, Hera's a great hero, Hera's a great hero, Hera was born to rule the world, and things like that. But she doesn't really have the kind of character growth to justify that kind of acclaim. It's not that Hera is a particularly cocky person. A common pattern I've noticed with terribly written girl boss characters like with She-Hulk in Eternal Outlaw, or with Galadriel in Rings of Power, and many other characters to that capacity, is that they all show a level of arrogance, as if to say, you must like me or else, even though they don't go through any kind of character growth, nor do they necessarily embrace this sort of timeless archetype. It just feels like a forced, honed-in, contemporary corporate trend rather than authentic character building. This issue could have been fixed if Hera had more character development, and there may be little saplings of that kind of thing, because you could make the argument that Helm and his daughter Hera do have their conflicts, with Helm wanting to protect Hera from harm, but at the same time Hera wants to defend her people. But at the same time there's this implication of oh no, Hera was right the entire time, even though there were some situations where it made more sense for her to stay behind and guide the people safely to Helm's Deep. This is the kind of character building that really needed to go back to the drawing room in order to really get correct. Because if you look across the internet, most of the reviews regarding War of the Rohirrim are primarily focused on not particularly liking Hera as a character. And it's mainly because many people have gotten so used to this irritating girl boss character throughout so much media that they're able to sniff it out the moment it shows up again. So it just seems kind of a shame that a character like Hera didn't really get her time to shine authentically. You see, the thing about Tolkien's world building is that even though Tolkien himself did not like allegory, Tolkien's world building is not just escapism. It's also an artistic account of Norse history. Even though it's not meant to be allegorical, it is meant to be a celebration of the entire culture that Tolkien managed to immerse himself in. So even though the core tenets, most of the core tenets of Helm Hammerhand's story is still there, just the way that Hera is characterized, especially in a manner that doesn't really grant much character growth, and the characters are trying to say she's an unsung hero even though her actions say otherwise, it just leads to a very disjointed experience. And this kind of characterization really holds this story back from its full potential. I mean, I can appreciate the fact that they got Merry and Pippin to voice act these orcs. I can appreciate the fact that they got Christopher Lee, who actually met Tolkien himself, have his vocal roles archived, and he presumably approved of the voice being used for that one scene. But at the same time, there's plenty of other scenes that I didn't even mention that involved a lot of nostalgia baiting, a lot of member berries. Hey, remember Gandalf? Hey, remember this and that? Remember this? Remember that? Oh, the stuff in the music. Remember the Howard Shore's music from the movies? And people like Jeremy Jans are saying, yeah, I remember that. So I might as well just watch the original thing. That's the problem with nostalgia baiting. It says, hey, remember this, remember this, remember this. If you keep saying, remember this, remember this, remember this, then we might as well watch the thing it's reminding us to remember. Like that's the issue that films like Jungle Book 2 had. So yeah, overall, the film still has its strengths. It still has its moments of creative flourish, but at the same time, this imbalance of characterization really brings this movie down. There's a lot of characterization moments, like with Hera and her relationship between herself and Wolf, and the way characters react to Hera. It felt very surface level of stuff. I mean, it has a lot of potential, like the characters of a safekeeper at Helm's Deep, the old caretaker of Hera, who was herself a shield maiden of Rohan in the past. There's just so much potential. I think if this film had just another rewrite of the script, just one more time to just go through the whole thing before going through the process of creating it, like it would have been great. It would have been genuinely great, up there with Peter Jackson's original film. But as it stands, it's a bit of a mess of a film, but I wouldn't call it a complete waste of time. I will acknowledge the strengths where it exists, but as the movie stands, I am going to give The War of the Rohirrim anime movie adaptation a 7.5 out of 12. If you ask me, this seems more like a corporate act from Warner Brothers trying to establish their IP, more so than them trying to honor the story that Tolkien himself wrote. That's what it comes across to me, at least. Do you people feel the same way, or is there some other nuance to the conversation that you'd like to bring? Please let me know down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to talk all about it to you later on. So, hopefully we'll keep endorsing Tolkien, keep endorsing anime, and who knows, maybe if Warner Brothers makes another adaptation like this, maybe they'll listen to this criticism, take it to heart, take it constructively, and we'll see more awesome art in the future. In the meantime, ScotsThinker signing out. Animati.